Hey everybody, Red Mage here. Welcome back to this series where I go through different RPG products that I have and give them a quick flip through and review. It's that time of year again, Halloween, and as a result, we all want to infuse a little bit of horror into our games, at least I do. And here are 5 supplements that I think are really good to add into your game. Now, they're not all supplements in the same way. You'll see that a couple of these at least are more specifically designed for particular kinds of games. And in fact, one of these is not really a supplement at all, it's its own game. But all 5 of them are useful to draw from in any kind of game, especially one that leans horror. First, I'm going to be covering The Forgotten Rites of the Moldering Dead by Don Stroud. I'm going to be looking at Into the Weird and Wild by Charles Ferguson Avery. I'm also going to be looking at Into the Cess and Citadel by Alex Coogan, and Charlie Ferguson Avery. I'm going to be looking at Nethalas Into the Midnight Throne. And I'm also finally going to be looking at the Cthulhu Alphabet, which is an A to Z reference for Lovecraftian mythos design by Michael Curtis, John Hook, and others. Now, I've reviewed all 5 of these on my channel before, but I think everybody should take a look at them if they haven't, because these are all fantastic supplements. First, I want to cover The Forgotten Rites of the Moldering Dead. Now, it says it's compatible with DCC, but really it's compatible with any OSR game. The art throughout the book is very good. It's not this good. This is one of my favorite pieces, and it's right away. It looks so cool. But the art throughout the book is still pretty good. It reminds me of 3rd edition D&D, as you'll see. Essentially what this book it's full of tables and ideas for making different kinds of undead creatures more interesting, more unique, and ways of thinking about them and approaching their creation that will make your players remember them at the table. You're not just going to be facing regular zombies or mummies or ghouls or ghosts or even liches, but you're going to be adding cool things to them with the tables in this book and with the ideas that this book kind of makes you consider. Here's the art that I mentioned before. You can see it's like 3rd edition. It's pretty good. It's not as good as that first page piece, which I think is just absolutely fantastic. I wish the whole book was in that style, but it's still good. Don't get me wrong. You get an introduction to the book, and then you get the beginning of the tables from this book. What's that smell? Along with the table of scavengers and the undead, the things that are eating the bodies. Okay, here you go. You want a horde? Well, awesome. What kind of horde or undead horde do you want? Zombie, skeleton, ghoul, mummy, vampire, or lich? Well, here are some subtables for the troops within that horde. Here are some generals that army horde might have. You want an undead dragon or a dead dragon somewhere out there? Well, what does it look like and what kind of a dragon was it? How do you trail this big beast and what kind of a trail is it for a dead dragon? Here are some dragon-specific parasites, as well as some fields of death, an ancient battlefield and some random tables there, all the way down to a small church or family cemetery. Loot from battlefields, because again, this is just talking about battlefields and the dead and huge sort of, huge style death. But here are some undead beasts, like a cave bear or some dire wolves, and where they come from, some situations where you might use them. Essentially, what you can see is that these are not huge tables for any one of these entries. There's 6, maybe 10, maybe 8 entries for each. You're going to be using a regular set of dice for these, not D100s, not D666 or anything like that. But what this book does is it forces you to kind of rethink undead. So instead of just having a skeleton, well, as you're going to see, what if it is a different kind of skeleton? What if it's an ogre skeleton, or what if it's a minotaur skeleton, which are some pretty common ones that we see. But what if it's a snake skeleton? Again, we've seen that from various adventures before. What if it's a saber-toothed tiger skeleton? Right? What if the skeleton guarding the entrance is actually an ape? Or maybe it's, a bunch of horses that have been raised from the dead, and now you have a bunch of horse skeletons that are attacking you. Whatever it might be, don't just throw skeletons at your party, right? Don't just throw zombies at your party. You got to think bigger than that. You got to think weirder than that. You've got to make the players think and remember this undead creature that is approaching the party, and it's not going to be something usual. So, for example, elaborating on the undead. How do they look? What are they filled with? What is their base humanoid type? And that might change their stats. Now, of course, this is for DCC, but you could adapt it to the game of your choice. What caused them to reanimate? How do they spread their contagion? Do you want to do Romero zombies? Awesome. Well, here you go. What is their base class or profession? Or, I love how it says, Romero was perhaps one of the greatest of all necromancers. That's a great reference. Malgor's unwholesome workers. This is a necromancer of lesser renown. But you want some mummies? Great. Well, what kind of mummy? What animates them? What's within the mummy? What are their animal companions? What is written on them? What's the curse, trigger, and effect? Where are they? These are really cool ideas. Books of mummification. Or rather, how mummification occurs and the various things that are with them. I shouldn't say it's a book of mummification, but it's the stuff that's around them. Ghosts. And again, I'm only 30 pages into this 100-page document. You can see what it's like. It's a really cool book that makes you really consider and rethink different kinds of creatures. It's not as simple as just saying, well, I'm going to throw some undead in my party. Boring. We've seen undead a million times. Make them interesting. Make them stand out to your players. Creep your players out with undead again. And that's what this book will help you do. The Forgotten Rites of the Moldering Dead. I highly recommend you guys check it out. If you're going to be running an undead-focused campaign, if you're going to be running Curse of Strahd or Ravenloft for Halloween or something around there, then get the Forgotten Rites of the Moldering Dead and tweak all of Strahd's minions in the ways that this book will give you, and you're going to find that your players remember it and are creeped out a lot more than if you just run skeletons or zombies or ghouls or whatever. So anyway, check out the Forgotten Rites of the Moldering Dead. Next is Into the Weird and Wild by Charles Ferguson Avery. This is a book that I have referenced several times and I've reviewed once a while back, and I think a lot of people are familiar with it. Into the Weird and Wild is essentially taking that feeling of getting lost in the woods with unknown things out there and horrors that the wilderness might have. And it condenses it into a book that is just absolutely fantastic in its presentation, its style, its tone, its writing, and its ideas. Again, I've reviewed this before, so I'm not going to go through the whole thing. But a huge portion of this book is just simply new creatures. 100 pages of creatures that your players will never have seen before. I've used a few of these in my campaigns, and they're always shocking and weird. My players remember them, whether you use them as a kind of creature or as a singular new boss monster or something like that, a named creature that's roaming through your hex crawl. These things are going to stand out to your players. But there's also tons and tons of cool locations, and the overall aesthetic of this book puts you right into this particular style of wilderness horror adventure. This book makes getting lost in the woods scary. Not just for you, the GM, but for your players. There's a bunch of extra rules in here and a bunch of subsystems for how to treat things like getting lost or going mad or cannibalism and lots of things like that. But I think a huge portion of this book and its value is just the overall aesthetic that it gives you, the vibe that you get when you're reading through it, and it draws you in, the flavor text for the monsters and the locations. And there are lots of locations you can plug into your campaign or hex crawl with this book. Again, subsystems, it's a system-neutral game, but it assumes certain things. Mostly you're going to be using this in the OSR. You could use it for any system, even 5e certainly, but it's going to be at its most useful if you're playing in the OSR. Tons of good rules, and all of them are designed to make the wilderness scary, make it hard to overcome. I think many of us are just used to the wilderness being a thing you trek through, right? You just spend a certain number of days in the wilderness, you might roll some random encounter checks, you might describe the travel as you go through. That's not what this book is for. This book is for when the players go into the forest, and that is your setting. It's not a travel book. It's for when the wilderness itself is the dungeon. I really, really like this book. Rules for cleaning a body and how to harvest from a dead animal that you've killed, the different phases of the moon and what that might do to you and to the things in the wilderness. One of the interesting elements here is that spending time in the woods, becoming lost in the woods, makes you become more like the woods. There's a sort of understanding of the woods in this book, that they're hostile to you, that the woods or the nature itself, the forest, it's a thing. And it's not always just simply going to destroy you right away, but it isn't passive. And you are not going in there to conquer it. You're going into it to survive. As it says here, to enter into the woods is to be at its mercy. You're taking your life in your own hands when you go into the wilderness in this book. It's a really cool way of looking at things. Again, the beasts of branch and bone, the monsters in this book are so good. Some of them are more standard, but all of them are just fascinating. One of my favorites is the Arcanus Arachne right away. I'm kind of arachnophobic, but this creature, I'm very arachnophobic, I should say, but this creature, I'm okay with it. They're so cool. Their webs are spells, or rather, they weave magic into their spells, and so as you walk through the woods, you can see the writings of spells in the webs in the trees. And when they gather together, they can do that. They don't know what they're doing exactly. They're not highly intelligent. They're sort of inherently magical, and they make these magical webs. But you can maybe use those webs if you could somehow bring them with you. If you're very, very careful, you could take the arcane webs of these creatures and use them as scrolls. That's so cool. The Bowick, the Blight Motes, the Bluchstound, the Bramble Beast, the Briar Scoffs. I love the Briar Scoffs too. The Cacophonous Crowmen, the Cherubs, the Children of the Woods, the Cinder Shams, the Curse Wield. I can go on and on. These creatures in this book are so cool. The Cinder Sham is awesome. It's an angler of the lost in the dark. It has a little flame on its tail, and it draws people to it. So instead of just doing the ordinary, what would you say, will-o'-the-wisp, right? You have it be a Cinder Sham. It's a slightly different kind of creature. And there's a reason to hunt it and kill it, because it has some really cool pelts, and it has Fire Gut, which is quite useful. It's a little grenade, but you got to be careful with it. All of the stuff in this book is like this. I really, really love Into the Weird and Wild. It's one of my favorite supplements, and I wish there were more like it in different areas, in different genres, in different parts of the world, like, an Underdark one, or a city one. And that's precisely what Into the Cess and Citadel is. It's by the same author, along with Alex Coggin. Into the Cess and Citadel is exactly Into the Weird and Wild, but for cities. Now, it doesn't quite translate because it's a different sort of idea. You're going to be dealing with faction play here, and so there's a lot more rules for how to create, particular factions and NPCs, which Into the Wild doesn't have so much, which makes sense. Now, if you look at the layout, it's this bright pink, and that can be off-putting to some people. But it fits with this sort of, unsettled nature of the city. What I like about this is it turns the city itself into a dangerous place, into a deadly place, once again, into a dungeon in a way. Now, it sort of assumes some things about the city, it sort of assumes some things about the world, and if you're going to use this book as written straight up, and the same thing is true for Into the Weird and Wild, you're going to be playing in a very particular kind of game. But I wouldn't recommend, you could, it'd be certainly fun. What I would recommend for most people who have their own settings and who have their own ideas is to take ideas from these books and to incorporate them into their game. Take the ideas, take the horror elements here, take the unsettled nature, the madness that is present in the city, and the idea of a city, especially a sprawling metropolis. There's just something in the book really delves into it. There's something almost terrifying about that, unnatural about that, right? Human beings aren't really meant to live in metropolises, especially ones that are crowded and full of vying factions and full of dangers and secrets where things don't necessarily like you. And in fact, just like the wilderness is hostile to you, this book assumes that the city itself is sort of hostile to you. And the one thing that it reminds you at the very end is, this city eats people. Never forget that. That's a really important idea, that the city itself is a bit of an antagonist, just like the forest in Into the Weird and Wild is an antagonist. These books are huge, by the way. Into the Weird and Wild is 248 pages. Into the Cess and Citadel is 288 pages. It is really cool. There's a lot of thematic writing and flavorful art throughout. This one has a little bit, I will say, it doesn't have as quite of a heavy horror or grotesque tone as Into the Weird and Wild. There's plenty of that here, but the overall effect is a little bit more muted, despite the bright colors. There's some cool rules about traveling through the city. There's cool rules about how to survive in the city, and if you don't have money, what happens to you in a city? How do you live off the land? How do you live in the streets? And there's tons and tons of encounters. But one of the things this book has tons of are regions of the city, locations, and pre-built NPCs and factions for you. So you can take those and put them into your game of choice. there is some cool stuff here. Rules for reputation, which is very important, obviously, in a city. And rules for buying and selling things. But there's also, again, this sort of assumption about a particular kind of city. And so, yeah, you can kind of become corrupted or changed by the city itself. There's a lot of cool diseases in the city. Arsonist's fever, creeping rash, candle wax, death, crust lock, the gilding. Yeah. It's a great, great book. But again, the overall effect is going to be one of darkness, horror, and creepiness. There are some creatures that are sort of more generic. There's a big idea here of demons, but demons not, yeah, as it says here, demon is sort of a catch-all term for the eclectic and colorful denizens of the city. So demon, not in the way that we might think of in the Western world, but more like maybe Eastern demons, the way you might think of in something like a Ghibli movie. Not that Ghibli is a heavy influence here, I would say. Look at some of these creatures. They're absolutely horrifying. The Crux Gripen. That looks like something from Fallout. The Master of Procession. The Sootfilk. The Short Block. Now, there are a lot of really cool rules about how to build a city here. Just like in Into the Weird and Wild has a lot of really cool rules about how to build a forest, how to lay it out. And this is a really cool set of rules for how to build a faction web and a political web in your city and to map them out. I always like the sort of visualizations of those things. It's very helpful to me. I'm a visual person. Into the Cess and Citadel is absolutely fantastic. Again, I've reviewed all of these before, so I'd recommend going to check out those reviews if you want a full flip through and a full review. But this is one that people are not going to want to miss. If you have, for whatever reason, not seen Into the Weird and Wild or Into the Cess and Citadel, I really recommend you check them out. They're some of my favorite supplements of all time. The next one, Nethalas, is a single-player game, or it can be a co-op game, but it's an actual RPG. It's not a supplement, first and foremost. But I still think of it in a way as a bit of a supplement because of how good the ideas are in this book and how you can draw on it for your own kind of horror game. Now, it's pretty clear that if you play this game, you're going to be playing a game that feels a lot like Dark Souls or something like that. And that's a particular tone. Not everybody likes that tone. But if you're looking at horror, I would say, even within the horror genre, not everybody likes that tone. But I would recommend checking it out regardless. Not because, again, you're going to be using this game system. You might, if you want to play a solo game. But because the overall aesthetic and the tone gives you so much to work with. And the flavor writing, the ideas throughout this book are really helpful if you just want to get into the mindset of a particular kind of game. And there's lots of cool monsters in here too. Lots of cool magic items, and lots of cool world building that you could steal for your own kind of horror, Dark Souls kind of game. That's what I would say. But again, the mechanics of it are not necessarily what you're going to want to draw on, because they're specific to this system. Jumping ahead, because again, most of the early part of this book is just simply the system itself. You get a lot of rules for how to actually track yourself as you travel through. Remember, this is a solo game, so there's a lot of rules for how to find those things. But you also get a lot of good tables for descriptions, room descriptions, corridor descriptions, monster descriptions for different events that you can run into. And these are all creepy and dark, and they're the sort of thing that would fit with a Darkest Dungeon style game or a Dark Souls style game. And again, I think you could easily adapt that to your game of choice. But moving past the actual mechanics of the game, what you get are really creepy creatures. The combat encounters in this game and the monsters that you're going to be fighting. There is some art, it's not on every page, as you can see, but the art that is present is really, really flavorful. Really, really good, creepy, and dark. Here you get the descriptions of these creatures: the Abyssal Vexator, the Amalgam, the Astral Beast, the Armor Construct, the Blade Wings, the Bloodstalker, the Bone Golem, Blightfang Rats, Cave-bound Leeches, Bone Spiders. Right, again and again you get these ideas. Just looking at this for a moment, you get cool ideas. And the actions, you get a d6 die for each of these creatures for the actions that they can take. Now again, you're not going to be using these particular mechanics, but it's easy to adapt them to your game of choice. You read through the corpse ants, for example. Okay, they're an animal. How many show up? Well, 3. Okay, so they're the sort of thing you're going to be fighting in number. Their awareness is 40, endurance is 60, athletics is 40, health is 4. That's unclear to me, having not gone into the system. I'm not sure what the relative power level is. But if you're going to fight 3 of them, say as a low-level game, okay, well then I might be able to adapt that to my game of choice. Their hit location, okay, that's not useful. Their armor, full body armor, but they're ants. So something maybe in the mid to high range, simply because they seem to be really tough. And then we have some actions. The chitinous, I always say chitin, but the chitinous bite, which is a physical attack. It deals d6 piercing damage on a hit. So these are kind of like onkegs, right? Because they have an acidic spray as well. Okay, well if your game has an onkeg, you can use that instead. But it also has this idea of the putrid eruption, which is really, really nasty. Little extra things to add in there. Now the corpse ant is pretty close to something like an onkeg, but not all of them are close to something from D&D or from OSR games of choice. Some of them are very, very particular. The flesh melt slime, the flesh eater, the giant spider, the hive larvae, the hollow shambler. Yeah, you get the point. This is a great book just in terms of the monsters, and there's also a lot of really cool magic items as well. So, Caer Nethalas Into the Midnight Throne does get you a lot of good stuff. The book itself is 227 pages as well, so it's a fairly big resource. Now, a good portion of that is the system, and if you're not interested in playing a solo game or this particular solo game, then that stuff's less useful. But even so, I don't mind getting an extra game here and there, because you can look at the mechanics of it and get ideas for your own game, especially survival horror kind of games, which is what this is. It's a solo survival horror game. So, Caer Nethalas Into the Midnight Throne, I recommend you guys check it out. And finally, and I would say last but not least, is the Cthulhu Alphabet, which is an A to Z reference for Lovecraftian mythos design. Now, I love this. First of all, the illustrations in this book. If you know the Alphabet series, then you'll know this is by Goodman Games, of course. If you know the Alphabet series by Goodman Games, the Adventurers Alphabet, the Dungeon Alphabet, I think there's the Adventurers Almanac. There's a whole series of books that are like this. This one is the Cthulhu mythos. And so it's horror themed. And one of the things you'll see in this is that it's just a great resource for making your games Lovecraftian. You can see the table of contents, right? Now, for the most part, there is one for every kind of one entry for every letter. But sometimes there's a couple. So there's a couple U's, a couple S's, a couple M's, just for example. The art in this book is just fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. And you just have a delight to read through all of these things. A is for angles. And this is so great. It's a little essay on the angles and on basically unnatural or impossible angles and impossible geometry, which is something that you often see in H.P. Lovecraft. And then there's a D12 table about or different ideas for how to turn angles and angular adventures into a full adventure. That's pretty cool. It's pretty weird. Great piece of art there by Peter Mullen. B is for books. Awesome. I love this sort of thing. Right? What's the subject matter? What's the type? What's the general description? What's the effect on the reader? Alternately, you can select one of these detailed books. This is so awesome. Number 3, this large, heavy tome details the ancient religious rites of numerous cultures with a focus on sacrificial rites. The book is always warm to the touch, and the heat is accompanied by a slight whiff of brimstone and ash. If left lying in one place for too long, it has been known to leave angular black marks on the furniture beneath it, and even set nearby manuscripts afire. Those handling the book have a propensity to steadily develop increasing pyromania that escalates to arson and murder by fire. That's great. C is for cultists. What is the cult? What do they want? What is their name? What is their personality? What are their abilities? This is really, really cool. What is the elder god that cult worships? Is it Hastur? Is it Yog-Sothoth? Is it Glaki? Is it Shoggoth? Is it Cthulhu himself? What is it? I love that. That's a great piece of art there as well. Cthulhu slumbering in the depths of R'lyeh or R'lyeh. Also by Peter Mullen. D is for deep ones. I love the deep ones. The Innsmouth look. A dozen demonic deep one plots. E is for Elder Thing. Lots of good entries there. F is for forbidden. A D12 table of forbidden items. The method of arrival. How did those forbidden items show up? G is for the Great Race. You get the point. I highly recommend the Cthulhu Alphabet. I think it's a fantastic read just on its own, but also it will give you a lot of cool ideas to infuse your games with a weird, over-the-top, Lovecraftian vibe. And that's not something that we often do, at least not something that I often do. My horror games tend to be more gothic. I like the gothic horror vibe really, really well. I try to stay away, I tend to stay away from body horror and from cosmic horror. But that's mostly just because I have avoided that in my games. I just haven't done it. I mean, it's not an intention, it's just I haven't gone towards cosmic horror. The closest I got in one campaign, I had a warlock of the King in Yellow in one of my West Marches. And I started to delve into that side of things, and he started to go a little bit crazy into the King in Yellow, and it was really fun. We developed some handouts for him, and he started having visions and dreams, and that was very fun. Then the character happened to roll a couple natural ones in a row in a dungeon, and he died horribly. So we didn't continue that whole arc, because he was dead. But it was a great character, and it was a lot of fun to develop that sort of more cosmic horror side to a game, and I had never done that before, and I haven't really done it since. Anyway, Cthulhu Alphabet. I think everybody should check it out. These are, again, 5 that I highly recommend, but I'm sure that there are tons of cool resources that you guys might know. I don't usually do this, but I would recommend people, if they have resources for Halloween or for horror, please put them in the comments if you've made it to this far in the video, because I would love to know more. I would love to know some more references and some more resources that are cool. I know there are tons of cool adventures and settings out there, or even whole RPG systems that you could draw from, but I mean specifically GM references or GM supplements. If you have any, please let me know, and everyone else as well. That'd be awesome. I've been looking at the Cthulhu Alphabet. I've been looking at Nethalas, into the Cess and Citadel, into the Weird and Wild, and the Forgotten Rites of the Moldering Dead. I'll put links below to where you guys can get them all, and I think most of them right now are on sale on DTRPG, because at least until Halloween, so for the next 8 days, I think they're like 31% off. So I would recommend everybody go check them out over on DTRPG, and I'll put links below to where you can get them. All right, everybody, I hope this has been interesting. Happy Halloween, and I'll see you all in another one.